Hi kids, what are we going to talk about today?
Our Sunday school teacher told us about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
What a great topic. I'm not so sure Christians will think it's so great, but finding the Dead Sea Scrolls is certainly one of the great discoveries illuminating the history of ancient Judaism in the period right before Christianity parted ways. They reveal all kinds of new information about life, philosophy, and religion during one of the most important times in Western history. But I want to talk about what they reveal about modern-day Christianity. The scrolls were found in 11 different caves on the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, near the ruins of an ancient city called Qumran. They were not, however, all found at the same time. The first scrolls were found by a Bedouin youth about your age. He took the scrolls he found to his family, which sold them to a dealer who eventually sold them at 2 different times to Israeli Jews. These Jews promptly published them and put them on display for the world to see. It was during this time that a war was going on, and when the dust settled, the state of Israel and the state of Jordan were created. The Qumran caves happened to be on the Jordanian side of the border. Semi-professional archaeologists assigned by the Jordanian government started searching for more caves and more scrolls. Unfortunately, what they really did was hire Bedouins living in the area to do most of the work. One of these caves the Bedouins discovered was right on the side of a cliff, and in it they found nearly 500 scrolls. Rather than allow archaeologists to remove them in a meticulous fashion, they just grabbed them up and sold them to a part-time antiquities dealer, who then sold them back to the archaeological team. By the time they got back, the scrolls were in thousands of pieces, requiring reassembly. So the Jordanian government set up a commission, whose job it was to put all the pieces together and then publish what they found. This is where the story gets interesting. A tantalizing leak in 1950 that the scrolls might contain some startling information caused a huge amount of interest and rumors about what was in the scrolls. The man put in charge of sorting through all these fragments was a fascist, anti-Semitic Catholic priest. And he looked at all of this interest with concern. What if there really was a bombshell among all these fragments? Might there be something in there that would threaten the Christian church he devoted his life to? So Father Roland de Waal took a number of steps to control the situation. First, he closed off access to the nearly 500 scrolls in his possession. Next, he carefully selected the team that would be allowed to work on the scrolls. They were all Christians, and mostly Catholic. There were no Jews allowed near the scrolls. There were 2 reasons behind this. First, having a Jew working directly in the Jordanian section would have been problematic. Second, and far more important, a Jew could not be trusted to keep the works under wraps. If a Jew found something interesting, he might immediately publish it, disregarding how it might affect the Christian church. De Waal saw how quickly the Jews had published the scripts they had, and he didn't want the same thing happening to his scrolls, at least not until he'd been able to develop a version of what the scrolls would say. For 40 years, most of the scrolls went unpublished. Their message would be hidden away until it was determined that they possessed no threat to Christian beliefs. Actually, it wasn't until photographs of the scrolls were published by outsiders that most of the scroll content would eventually reach the public. There was nothing left to keep secret, since anyone could see what was on the scrolls thanks to the photographs. What the process highlights is the difference between Christianity and Judaism. The Jews had no fear that anything contained in these materials would undermine their belief system. Let the world see their history. The Christians had no such confidence. Lurking on any fragment could be the text that invalidated their theology. The Christians who controlled the scrolls had an underlying fear of the unknown, You will only fear what might be contained on the materials if you are not confident that they will support your position and beliefs. The Jews were willing to publish and let the chips fall where they may, but not the Christians. There is a parallel to this which occurred in the 1980s with a different religion, but also a text that revealed something disturbing. In 1984, an antiquities dealer named Mark Hoffman brought a letter to the head of the Mormon Church in Salt Lake City. The letter contained some very damaging material about the founder of the Church of the Latter-day Saints. The head of the church at the time believed the contents were genuine, and he had the letter purchased and hidden away from the public. As it turns out, Mark Hoffman was not an antiquities dealer. He was a very skillful forger. The letter was a fake, yet the head of the church had so little confidence in the founder of his religion that he believed it genuine. And in believing it genuine, he decided to hide it from the Mormon community, feeling they were better off not knowing the truth. Ultimately, the Christians who tried so hard to control the message contained in the Dead Sea Scrolls only displayed their own fears about the doctrines they believe in. If they thought there might be something damaging to their beliefs, then they didn't have as much confidence in those beliefs as they proclaimed. Faith is a shaky proposition if it might be invalidated by the next discovery.